Hello again, wrestling fans, and welcome to another edition of the Good Friends, Better Enemies podcast. My name is Jay, and I, of course, am always, as always, joined by the incomparable, incomparable, unbelievably talented, suave, and whatever else. I can't read what he had me read on air here. Tyrone. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Well, Happy New Year, Jay. I'm great. How are you?
I am fine, thank you. Fine, very, very well indeed. We are just coming off the heels of the holiday season. And I just cracked my first ever Publican House light lager from the Publican Brewery, which I believe you're very well acquainted with, my friend.
Yeah, I know a little bit about it. I may pop in from time to time.
Pop in for 8 to 10 hours at a time.
Yeah, spoiler alert, I work for them.
There you go. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, Tyrone, for that gift. Tyrone and I had a chance to do a social distance visit over the holidays, and he was kind and generous enough to bring me a sampling of what they offer at the restaurant that he currently resides at. And want to talk briefly about what's going to be on tap this week for the Good Friends, Better Enemies podcast. It is a day that will live in infamy. Today is January 4th, 2021. And of course, that means only one thing. It is the anniversary, the 22nd anniversary of the Finger Poke of Doom, one of the most controversial wrestling angles and wrestling stories to come out of the late 90s going into the new millennium. And what many people perceive to be the death nail in the WCW coffin, or at least they were starting to build the casket with this particular angle. So we thought, what better way to ring in the new year than talk about this particular subject? And in fact, what we're going to be doing is a retrospective about Kevin Nash's career. Now, spoiler alert, in this particular episode, we start off just having a bit of a conversation about Kevin Nash's career, and it ends up becoming more of a point-by-point retrospective look at his biggest, most pivotal moments, as against just simply discussing an overall view. So we started off in a way looking kind of at a broad picture, and then eventually kind of just decided halfway through the broadcast that we were going to kind of use tentpole moments in terms of his career to kind of anchor this whole thing. So Tyrone, what are your thoughts, pal?
Well, I mean, I wasn't looking forward to doing this Kevin Nash episode. You know that. You kind of begged and pleaded me to do it, and I finally caved as a little New Year gift for you, because we know when I want to do something, you're going to have to next. But when it comes to the Finger Poke of Doom, I mean, yeah, there's really not much else you can say about it. It's not good. It was terrible booking. It was a lot of what the actual fuck is going on here, which is kind of what WCW turned into at this point. Because this was what, 99, correct?
That's right. It was a couple of days after the Goldberg title switch. Goldberg's streak ended at Starrcade 98 with him taking the jackknife from Kevin Nash. But of course, he had the assistance of Scott Hall with a cattle prod. And of course, before that, we had Disco Inferno run in and we had Bam Bam Bigelow run in. So it was just a real schmozzy finish and just a horrible way to end such an incredibly well-built angle in terms of Goldberg's streak. So, yeah, we were going into 99 with this
Jay,
event.
Let me throw this at you quickly. What do you think was worse, Scott Hall using the cattle prod or the Mountie using the shock stick back in the early 90s?
Do you mean worse as in like just bad, or worse as in like more devastating in terms of being like keeping kayfabe?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think for the sake of realism, the cattle prod looked a little bit more realistic because they didn't have that dubbed over sound effect and things of that nature. But I think that probably in terms of believability, I think probably the shock stick was maybe a little bit more believable in 92 or 91 than a cattle prod would have been in going into 1999.
Plus, being the good old Canadian boys that we are, we can't really hate on Mr. Jacques Rougeau at all, because he's just a goddamn legend up here.
Most certainly not. No, we can't disparage the good name of the Rougeau family. That's for sure. Um, yeah, I mean, going into this particular episode, I know that you weren't overly enthusiastic. I did enjoy it. I think that we had a really, really good conversation once we got into it, the meat and potatoes of the conversation, and getting into certain aspects of Nash's career. We haven't touched on the finger poke of doom yet. This is going to be probably a 2 to 3 part episode that we are going to go throughout the year, kind of finishing up. We'll probably do another Nash
Hold
episode,
on, hold
maybe
on, hold
sometime
on,
in the
hold on,
spring.
hold on, hold on, hold on. I did not agree to do a 2 to 3 part episode on this. I thought we were doing a one and done.
We only got to WrestleMania 11.
And that's where it could stop. We don't need to talk anymore about him.
Okay, well, we'll discuss. Maybe I'll try to bribe you with I don't know what I'll do. Maybe I'll take you to IHOP or something. We'll see what happens.
I don't like pancakes though, so that doesn't help me at all.
They have bacon, they have eggs, sausage, toast.
All right, fine, but we're also gonna. I think we should end this Kevin Nash saga with a potential watch along of Magic Mike. That might entice me.
Well, I mean, that might be a pretty long watch along. We could certainly talk about it. I think for the purposes of this, us finishing at WrestleMania 11 probably fits the bill quite nicely. And, if we do decide to continue on, I think begrudgingly you will eventually go along with another episode, then we can maybe pick it up sometime WrestleMania season, maybe look at picking up at WrestleMania 11, then moving on to further along in his career. But for the purposes of today, we just more or less wanted to discuss what our feelings were and our thoughts going into this episode, and just give you a little bit of a backstory and a little bit of some history in terms of how we arrived at the decision to get here. And obviously, this being the anniversary of the finger poke kind of made the most sense. So I certainly hope you enjoy it. I had a lot of fun with it. I know Tyrone didn't enjoy the subject matter, but we still had a spirited debate nonetheless.
And a little bit of a, not necessarily a spoiler, but just as a heads up, guys, we were drinking during this one. It was a long day. We recorded this one a little while ago, and yeah, I don't know. I haven't listened to it back. I know Jay has. He says it's great, but I was a little bit tipsy at this point, so we'll see how it turns out.
Yeah, I think it was fine. I think that definitely you needed a little bit of liquid encouragement to get you through, and I completely understand that. But nonetheless, I mean, I don't really have much else to add to this one. I think that our this week in wrestling history has to be the finger poke of doom. We can also just briefly touch on in 2010, January 4th, 2010 was a Monday. That was also the same night that Bret Hart returned to the WWE for the first time in 12 years on Raw. And we also had the huge TNA Impact show that debuted on Monday night, and that was the debut of Hogan and Flair. I believe Jeff Hardy was there, Rob Van Dam. There was a whole slew of people that were on that card to try to, I don't know if they were trying to recreate the Monday Night War in some kind of way, but it certainly had that vibe going into that night. Do you have any memories about that particular Monday, Tyrone?
To be perfectly honest with you, I don't. I'm not going to lie. I wasn't really watching as religiously at that point as I was before or after. It kind of just, I would read about it online and I would go back and see a couple of things. But to me, it's funny to look at what TNA was then, trying to bring in Flair, Bischoff, Hogan, Jeff Hardy, all that, and where they are now. Because now they're doing this cool thing with AEW and doing almost an invasion thing. But one weird thing about that to me is that you look at the current federation right now, and you've got Roman Reigns doing phenomenal work with Paul Heyman beside him. And I almost feel like they're trying to do a weird version of that with Kenny Omega and Don Callis. I don't think it's going to have the same outcome or anything like that. I feel like people are going to shit all over it, but I'm excited.
Well, it's definitely an exciting time right now going into 2021. I mean, with everything going on in the world right now, we don't know what to expect in the next year. I think we're all hopeful that at some point in the next year, we're going to have fans back in the stadiums and back in the arenas to some degree, obviously, as long as it's safe and everybody's able to do so. But I think that there's something to be said for that aspect of it right now is really hurting every company and every product, the lack of crowd interaction. So it's hard to really gauge, to your point about these different scenarios with TNA, or rather, sorry, Impact working with AEW, and I believe there's also some involvement from the NWA as well with a talent share type situation. It's going to be hard to really get a real good gauge of how it's going to go over until we get some people back in the arenas. But to your point, I mean, it is a very, very interesting time to be a wrestling fan, and the same as it was back in 2010 for that particular event that I just alluded to. I mean, I think more eyeballs were probably on Bret Hart's return to the company than it was seeing some of the stars from yesteryear back in another run for TNA Impact on that fateful night back in 2010. So I know for myself, I was switching back and forth, but the moment that I saw that Bret was coming out, I mean, that had all my attention. Just because you're such intrigue involved, like what was going to happen, what was he going to say, as opposed to seeing the tired old Flair and Hogan routine. Not to disparage their characters or their legacies, but at that point, I don't know that they were maybe drawing the kind of numbers of fans in that something that had been so longed for by the wrestling audience, a Bret Hart return. I know not you, but most wrestling fans were very, very intrigued by Bret Hart returning. So I don't know. It's hard to say, but there is definitely parallels between the two, I think.
One thing you just said that I got to kind of poo-poo on a little bit here was you say the tired old Ric Flair Hulk Hogan feud, but I look at it like, well, WWE was giving us the tired old Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels feud. You knew that was going to happen. Anyway, I don't want to get into that right now. We have a whole Kevin Nash episode ahead of us. We will delve into the Bret Hart Shawn Michaels feud even more, I'm sure, down the road.
Absolutely.
But as Jay said, we've got a great episode for you guys, and we just wanted to wish you a happy new year and hope that 2021 treats you at least a little bit better than 2020 did.
Or better than a finger poke did. So,
well, you never know. A finger poke can do nice as long as it's not a finger poke of doom.
That's true. Or then again, a finger poke of doom can mean a lot of things. There's a lot of different ways to skin a cat, and there's also a lot of different ways to reach us on social media. Tyrone, how do they reach us?
Oh, you can find us on Twitter at good_enemies, and you can find us on Instagram at good_enemies.
And you've already found us on YouTube. Also, don't forget to check out the Count It Out podcast, Count It Out 7 with Mike and Tyler. They're our mothership here, and we're kind of a shuttlecraft from their enterprise. We wanted to wish our counterparts over at the Count It Out 7 podcast a very happy new year as well. And I believe that there is some exciting stuff on tap coming up in the next couple of weeks and months, coming up with maybe the four of us getting together for some riveting conversation as well. So with that being said, if you have nothing else to say, Tyrone, and nothing else to add, I'd like to go ahead and throw to the Kevin Nash retrospective episode. Okie dokie. So Tyrone has nothing to say. We're all set, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm sorry. I thought we were just throwing to the episode there. I didn't know what the hell we were doing.
That's okay. That's totally fine. I wasn't sure if you wanted to throw in your obligatory goodbye, but
I can totally do that. But at the same time, I also think it's funny that we potentially have a little thing coming up with Tyler and Mike. They got to bring us on to get the ratings up, right, bud? We're like the Austin and Vince McMahon.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I think that they need to pop a rating here, so they need to get us on there for sure. We're the equivalent of the WWE pulling out a Legends Night the first week of 2021.
Anyway, with that being said, here is our retrospect of Kevin Nash up until WrestleMania 11. Jay, I love you.
Oh, wait, that's your line. Crap.
Fuck you.
Enjoy the show, folks. It's the episode that we both knew was coming from the beginning, the episode I've been looking forward to so much. It is the Kevin Nash appreciation episode.
Or as I like to call it, the Super Shredder disappreciation episode. I have nothing good to say about this man. How the hell did I get wrapped into this? Like, come on, dude. The guy couldn't even do a goddamn jumping jack in the Magic Mike movie, let alone wrestle a match. This is going to be terrible. I am not happy. Fuck you, Jay.
Well, I got to say, I'm a little bit astonished that you're so upset about the jumping jacks, because in a previous episode we discussed how that's your workout regimen. So looking forward to this one.
And I can actually do one versus him, which is really sad because I am not an in shape human being. I am shapes, but I am not in shape.
Okay, well, fair enough. This particular episode is more of a discussion about Nash and his career rather than it is a retrospective or a countdown list or talking about specific situations. We're just going to have a little discussion about Nash. The reason we're doing this one, folks, is because since the beginning of this podcast, the infancy, the first episode, I have gotten nothing but flack. I've been just constantly lambasted about my fandom of Kevin Nash and Diesel, whatever incarnation you want to discuss. I think we're going to mainly focus on the Federation and maybe some of the NWO and things of that nature. We probably won't touch too much on the early Vinny Vegas stuff and things of that nature.
Oh
but
no. We are talking about Vinny Vegas and Oz because those are the only characters that he actually excelled at.
Well, anyways, my point was that this particular episode, or this bonus episode rather, is just going to be more or less Tyrone and I talking about Kevin Nash and talking about my fandom of his over Tyrone's distaste. It's been a point of discussion in almost every single episode that we have had so far. Even if Nash isn't on the card, I always get some kind of shot about Kevin Nash or Diesel at some point. So once and for all, we are going to have it out right now on the Good Friends, Better Enemies podcast bonus episode, the Kevin Nash appreciation episode. Why don't you take it away, pal?
What do you want me to start with, dude? Like, I'm not happy we're doing this. You roped me into this. You owe me on this, is all I'm going to say. But when it comes to Kevin Nash, I think he sucks. I don't think that there is any worse big man other than Psycho Sid than Kevin Nash.
Really?
Okay.
I'm already hot. I'm already hot.
Sorry. I should rephrase that. No better big man in a main event picture. Was he better than Bash and Booger? No, actually, not in my opinion. He wasn't, but he sucked. Nash sucked.
You think the Great Khali was better than Kevin Nash?
I would much rather watch the Great Khali perform than Kevin Nash, just because at least with Khali, you were cheering for him, you were hoping for him. Like, we've gone to house shows together where we have cheered on the Great Khali many, many times.
No, we have not. That's not true. That's not true.
That is true. There was a definite couple times where we saw the Great Khali come out and we were both cheering for him.
But you think that I am cheering the Great Khali over, like, say, Kevin Nash? You think that I would prefer to see Kevin Nash, the Khali over Kevin Nash?
No, I don't. But that's not what you asked me. You asked if I thought that Great Khali was better than Kevin Nash, and I said I would much rather watch the Great Khali than Kevin Nash, anytime, any place.
Now, is this based on solely in-ring work or promos or presence, or is it just the whole package for you?
It's everything. I don't think that Nash can work in ring. I think his promos are lazy. I thought that he broke the fourth wall way too soon, and it shouldn't have been done. And yeah, I have nothing nice to say about the guy whatsoever.
Well, I'm not going to necessarily disagree with your fourth wall opinion. I do agree that WCW, I mean, it was sort of controversial and a big time thing back in '96 when he joined WCW with Scott Hall and created the Outsiders right before the NWO and afterwards. I do agree wholeheartedly that there was a lot more fourth wall breaking going forward after that. I think in the beginning it was very controversial and it was very timely, very very newsworthy, and there's a lot of shock value to it. But without question, towards the end of the WCW run with Nash, there's no argument that the fourth wall was broken way too much. I completely agree with that. I'll give you that.
You briefly talk about Nash being in the NWO there and being one of the founding members. Nash isn't even in my top 15 members of the NWO. That's how I feel about the man.
Yeah, and I just think that your opinion of him is just so, I don't know. I put it in the category of Bret Hart. Like, you just don't like Bret Hart because he had puffy hair and his mouth was open when he wrestled matches. And then you thought
I have actually spoken about this before where I have no issue with Bret Hart pre-94. It's after that, and when he started doing his little crybaby gimmick or this and that, that's when I had an issue with Bret Hart. Whereas I have never, ever, ever gone on record saying I like anything about Kevin Nash. So to me, the two of them aren't even on par.
well, I think they're on par in the sense that you have a unjustifiable dislike of Nash. I don't think that you can legitimately, objectively look at Nash's career, whether it be in WWF or WCW, and say that he had no redeeming quality whatsoever. I think that's ridiculous.
I was what? When did he win the WWF title? 94?
Yeah, no, 1994. Yeah.
I was 8 years old. I was the target audience at that point. And even at that point, I think I looked at my dad and asked him, why did that happen? And my dad looked at me and went, because he's Big Daddy Cool. And I just looked around, and as an 8-year-old kid, I turned around and went, more like Big Daddy Fool. And I thought that was the biggest insult I could ever make. That shows you what I thought about Nash, even as a kid.
Well,
Even as a kid.
it shows me that your wit hasn't improved much since. But I will say that I just think that if you look at his overall career, it's pretty hard for me to stomach anybody ever saying he had no positive contributions whatsoever. And I'll tell you what, I'll start with one right now. If it wasn't for Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, there'd be no guaranteed contracts in wrestling. I mean, maybe they would have eventually happened, but if it wasn't for them jumping ship in '96, guaranteed contracts wouldn't have been a thing for the boys for a long time.
Okay, I didn't realize we were talking about a whole business perspective here. I thought we were just talking about him as a wrestler. You want to throw the business shit on me? Sure. He had a couple of redeeming qualities. He was also the bitch booker who put himself over everybody. Who's going to end Goldberg's streak? Nobody should have for a while, but then Nash had to because he was the booker. You want to talk business and him doing that? That's great, but then he took the whole other level of business to a different degree and ruined it.
I won't disagree with you that I think Goldberg's run ended too quickly. And I don't think necessarily that Nash should have been the guy to do it. I certainly don't think that they should have done the finish they did with the taser and Scott Hall and all that kind of thing. But your point is a little bit moot to me because you can't stand Goldberg either. So why do you care?
You're right. I can't stand Goldberg, which should tell you how much Nash should not have been the person to do that whatsoever.
Okay, so who should have been the guy then to end Goldberg's streak in your mind?
Honestly, I don't think anybody. I think Goldberg should have been that guy that ran forever with the title. He should have been the one. If anyone was, I can't believe I'm saying this, but if anybody was going to go toe to toe with Bruno Sammartino's length as a champion, it should have been Goldberg. They could have done it with him. He would have ran over everybody. He could have had a couple of close calls here and there, but my God, that Kevin Nash match should have been what he was famous for. A 3.5-minute match with him tearing his quad at the end.
Yeah. Well, I also cannot believe you're saying this right now. I certainly would never have put Bruno Sammartino and Goldberg in the same sentence. I'm a fan of Goldberg to an extent, much more so than you are. So I do agree with you that streak should have gone on a little bit longer. Do I think that streak should have gone on for another year or so? No, I think that's a little long. I think maybe you should have looked at having Goldberg lose the title maybe another 6 months later or something like that. But I certainly don't think that he should have been carrying that title until the end of WCW or the time that the WCW went out of business.
All right. Well, we're going to agree to disagree on that because look at
So you think that Goldberg should have beat Hogan at the Georgia Dome in July of 1998, and he should have kept the title for 3.5 years.
Why the hell not? Hogan did it.
Goldberg wasn't Hogan.
No, but arguably they were on the same level of skill. And when you think about 98, the only wrestlers that were rivaling Goldberg's popularity were Austin and maybe The Rock. Goldberg was the top guy in WCW.
I totally agree with that.
So why not give him a super lengthy title run? Why not let him do that?
I think you're also, okay, I appreciate, like, you are kind of like hearkening back to our traditional format on the show with the rebooking and all that kind of thing. I appreciate that. But at the same token, I think you're also discounting the landscape of the industry at the time. Do you think anybody was carrying the title for even a year at that time? Even Austin, who was the hottest guy in the company, wasn't going to, in the WWF, that is, wasn't going to carry the title for a year. The other thing, too, is you have to take into account that there's certain guys that are much better at the chase than they are at the conquest. Like at Austin, for example. Austin was he was a great champion, but he was much better chasing the title, being screwed over by McMahon constantly, than he was actually holding the title. The chase was better than the conquest. And while I do agree with you that Goldberg was amazing with his streak, and I don't think the streak should have been broken quite as early as it was, I also don't think that Goldberg was necessarily the best champion. So having him drop the title while it would have broken the streak didn't necessarily ruin Goldberg whatsoever. I think Goldberg being on the chase rather than holding the title would have been much better.
Yeah, no, no, I disagree. 100% I disagree. I think Goldberg should have turned heel after he won the title and been that guy to run over everybody. I think it would have made people like him even more than they did, and they would have made him almost like the Stone Cold. He already looked like Stone Cold to a degree. Why not make him even more like him?
Why not just have him join the NWO then?
I like the fact that this is supposed to be the Kevin Nash appreciation episode, and I have managed to get you not to talk about him for almost 5 minutes.
Yeah, well, we're getting back to it right now. So from there, we talked about, we both agree that Nash maybe wasn't the right guy for Goldberg to drop the title to. I agree with that. You agree with that. But
maybe he says. He doesn't agree all the way. He says, oh, he might not have been the guy. I don't know. Blah, blah, blah. There might have been
people. I have to give it some more thought. I mean, I haven't put a ton of thought into it. We're just going on the fly right now. You and I are having a legit conversation. This is the kind of conversation that you and I legitimately have on the phone, every once in a while, or back in the day when we used to sit and have pints at a bar, maybe do some fun trivia stuff, have a couple of shots of Jack Daniels, whatever. We used to talk about this kind of stuff, and that's legitimately what we're doing right now. So for me, I have a really hard time stomaching the idea that you have no redeeming qualities about Kevin Nash whatsoever. I first of all, I think that he had some very decent matches in his Federation run. You look at his matches with Bret Hart, you look at his matches with Shawn Michaels, certainly not with Psycho Sid. We can both agree on that. But I mean, like that match at Survivor Series 95 with Bret Hart was maybe the best match of his career.
I'm not going to argue that. It probably was, but it doesn't make it a good match in my eyes. Just because other people can make him look good doesn't mean that he's a good worker and he had a good match. It means that his opponents did their job perfectly for him.
So you think that the Survivor Series 95 match was not a good match?
Correct.
I think you're just trying to get me hot on purpose. Like, I just don't understand how you can just logically look at that match and be like, this is a bad match. It's maybe one of the best main event matches in Survivor Series history, that match. It's phenomenal. It's really, really good. Same thing with
but listen to what you listen to what you just said about the best match in Survivor Series history main events. What other main events in Survivor Series history were even worth mentioning? And don't say the screw job.
I'm not going to say the screw job. I think a year later, I think you sort of have the exact same example we're talking about right now.
No. You're not replacing a Kevin Nash match and saying that a Sid match was almost as good. Do you realize the argument you're giving me right now? I'm never going to agree with this.
I didn't ask you to agree. It's my opinion versus yours. That's fine if you don't like it. I don't care. But he had other matches too. Like the namesake of this podcast, Good Friends, Better Enemies, in your house. April 28th, 1996 in Omaha, Nebraska. You had that no-holds-barred match with Diesel versus Shawn Michaels. That match was phenomenal, too. That match was not good
and
either?
we just talked about that, though, where it's other people who are working and doing their jobs by making Nash actually look like he knows how to wrestle
It's
and
not all the other guy,
put
man.
a fist up in the air and
It's
jackknife somebody.
It's not all the other guy. I agree with you to an extent that, yes, there's going to be guys that can work circles around other guys, but I can't agree with you on Diesel. I mean, on Kevin Nash, like, he could work. He wasn't the greatest worker, but he could work. Guys could pull great matches out of him. The Undertaker did at WrestleMania 12. That was a good match. I mean, I just don't see how you can, realistically talk to me right now and tell me that he couldn't work a lick.
You know how good of a worker Diesel was? He worked you into thinking that he was a good worker. He worked movie fans, child movie fans in 1990 into thinking that he was really a bad villain. He's great at working people into thinking that he's good, but he is not a good worker, period.
He was really good in The Longest Yard.
No, he wasn't at all. Steve Austin was the best wrestler in that, and we know that. And the real MVP of that goddamn movie will always be Joey Coco Diaz.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I think we should just maybe have a couple of discussions about matches. Like, okay, so obviously you're not going to agree on any matches that you think are good of his. But I'm going to start off with a couple, and we're just going to go through just discussing briefly his run in the WWF. I'm not going to go through necessarily his debut. We all know that he was Shawn Michaels heavy for a while. I think his big coming out party for WWF was at Royal Rumble 94, where he eliminated a bunch of guys. That was a theme that went on throughout the Royal Rumble multiple times thereafter. I think it really started with Yokozuna. I guess Hulk Hogan really started it, but Yokozuna did it the year previous. And then, of course, you had Diesel do it in 94. I think Diesel's, that was sort of, as I said, a coming out party for him in terms of him being somebody that the company was looking at putting some emphasis behind. He didn't have a match at WrestleMania 10, but he, again, was Shawn Michaels heavy. Still, though, having that kind of impact at a Royal Rumble, putting aside your distaste for Nash and Diesel, can you at least talk about, how you feel about, in general, big guys or superstars that are thinking about putting the jetpack behind or some emphasis behind, how you feel about them having that kind of performance in the Rumble?
Yeah, okay, fine. That's a great spot to showcase somebody that you want to become your next legendary superstar. But look at all the people that have had that spot. You mentioned Yokozuna. You mentioned Hulk Hogan. Okay, Hogan, no one's going to ever top him other than maybe Austin as the top attraction in company history. Yokozuna kind of fizzled out. Then you go to Dickhead that we're talking about right now, and yeah, he had a great showing in the 94 Rumble. There is no doubt about that. 95, don't really know if anybody had a great showing. 96, they kind of tried to do it with Vader, had him debuting. Then you fast forward, though, to what I like to think of as the ultimate reason why I'm making this point, and that's 2001 with Kane. Kane should have been a 15-time world champ, undefeatable monster. I guess he would have lost 15 times by that logic, but you know what I'm saying. And he wins the Rumble in 2001. He has that huge showing. He makes it to the finals, throws out more people than ever, and the guy doesn't even win a damn championship for years. I don't think it's necessarily the spot that makes the person. I think it's whoever behind the people that make the person. We all knew Vince saw dollar signs when he saw Oz. He wanted them. He wanted Vinny Vegas in his main event of WrestleMania. And the best part of that is when you look at it, did Vinny Vegas ever main event WrestleMania? No. He never got that main event match, and that is the best reason.
Well, I wasn't planning on drinking another beer, but now you've got me a little bit red-faced, so I'm gonna have a little sip here.
You know what the best match that Kevin Nash ever had was?
What's that?
95 King of the Ring against Mabel.
He didn't face Mabel at 95 King of the Ring. He faced him at SummerSlam 95.
Okay, whatever. 95 against Mabel.
Okay, well, your opinion aside, we go from Kevin Nash being Shawn Michaels' second at WrestleMania 10 to having Bret Hart defend the championship against Diesel at King of the Ring 94. Now, this was the first time Diesel had been given the opportunity to have any kind of like lengthy match in a ring. I didn't think it was that bad a match. I think it was the worst of the trilogy of matches that Bret and Diesel would have. I don't know if you recall this particular match or this particular event. I know that you're a big Art Donovan fan, so maybe we can talk about that a little bit.
Oh, I'm a big fan of this event because it's just ridiculous on so many levels. Ridiculous on so many levels. The fact that we're talking about, first of all, fuck you with Art Donovan. No, not a fan. Second of all, the fact that that was the title match at King of the Ring 94 kind of shows you what they thought about King of the Ring title matches. They didn't matter. It was all about who was going to win the King of the Ring tournament. Even when you look at King of the Ring 93, you had Hogan dropping the title to Yokozuna, but it was middle of the card. The main event was the whole tournament finale. 95, tournament. That's all people cared about. 96, what do you remember about 96 other than Austin 316 promo? Nothing. The championship match at a King of the Ring didn't mean shit. You might as well have been main eventing a house show in Biloxi.
Which is in Mississippi, by the way. Now, I don't disagree with you in terms of the championship match not meaning a whole lot. Just going to rewind a little bit to a couple of your points there. First of all, the Yokozuna Hulk Hogan match at 93 sucked because it should have been Bret versus Hogan at SummerSlam 93, and Hogan should have tapped to the sharpshooter. Secondly, I do agree with you. Secondly, I do agree with you that championship matches didn't necessarily mean as much. I don't know if you recall this, but I think it might have been the year that Brock Lesnar won the title, won the King of the Ring at, I think it was 2002. That was the first year where they added stakes to where if you win the King of the Ring tournament, you become the number one contender for SummerSlam. That should have been done a long time previous. I think if you had done that back in the mid 90s, it would have been a huge, huge boon to the actual event. Just the same way they did with the Royal Rumble. I think the first couple of Royal Rumbles, to a previous episode we've talked about, when you have just a Rumble match by itself and there's no stakes, who really cares? Same thing with the King of the Ring. I mean, it's a great, feather in your cap. But if you're not getting anything out of it other than bragging rights, then what's the point? If you had back in, say, like 94, you'd had, the winner of the King of the Ring go on to face the champion at SummerSlam. It would have made sense, actually, because Owen faced Bret. And same thing with 95, 96, 97, everything going on. Like, I just think that stakes add and elevate certain events quite a bit and elevate certain victories quite a bit. When it comes to Diesel and Bret, I've already alluded to the fact that I think that match wasn't necessarily all that great. I think they had much better matches going forward. But I think that it shows a lot in terms of how they felt about Diesel at the time, giving him a title shot at that time in 94, June of 94.
And I still don't think he was ready. I don't think he deserved that title shot.
I agree.
I don't think that he ever deserved a title shot. I don't think he ever drew any money unless he was wearing the colors of the NWO, in which case Hogan was making him the money.
You cannot seriously make that statement with a straight face. You think Hogan was the only guy that drew money for the NWO?
I think Hogan was the initial draw 100% at first, and then I think it was Scott Hall.
Yeah, I just think that you're just so biased against Nash that you're just not being rational about it. I don't think there's any way that you can realistically say that Kevin Nash had no drawing ability whatsoever as an NWO member. I think that he had much more drawing ability than Scott Hall did, and I think he was a much bigger star than Scott Hall was by the end of it.
And I think that's the dumbest statement that anyone's ever made.
Well, fortunately for you, nobody asked. Moving on from the King of the Ring 1994, we both agree that that wasn't the greatest match in King of the Ring history or WWF Championship history. We go on to SummerSlam 1994, where we have an Intercontinental Championship match between Kevin Nash and Razor Ramon. Now, the night prior at a house show, you had Kevin Nash, Diesel, and Shawn Michaels win the tag team championships over the Head Shrinkers. So Kevin Nash was walking into this match as one half of the tag team champions. Now, this would be foreshadowing something very interesting, as Kevin Nash and Scott Hall obviously would leave together, within a matter of a month or so, going to WCW 2 years later and becoming huge stars and propelling the WCW fortunes into becoming one of the most profitable companies in the history of wrestling. Actually, the most profitable company in the history of wrestling at that time in the late 90s, until, of course, Vince McMahon went public and things of that nature. So with that being said, I'm just curious about your thoughts about that first meeting between Razor Ramon and Diesel. I'm sure that you have the same thoughts that you did about the King of the Ring match. So lay it on me, pal.
Oh, I really like Razor Ramon. He's one of my favorite wrestlers ever. And I think he's another one that you give him pretty much anybody and he can make them look good, as he proved here. This is going to be my point for everything. I want you to know that.
No, I'm aware of that. This is why this episode is becoming a little bit redundant. I'd love if you'd add a little bit more to it than just saying I just hate Nash for every response, but that's fine. We'll go from there to Survivor Series 1994, where we have the Teamsters, captained by Shawn Michaels and Diesel. And that was the first time we saw the breakup. We saw the tension building throughout. Diesel was slowly, in the weeks building up to this, becoming the character babyface, or actually becoming just a legit babyface in this match. It sort of, to me, had shades of the $1 Million Man and Virgil rivalry as well, in the sense that Shawn was just so overly confident and cocky about having Diesel as his heavy, and then slowly and through a slow burn throughout the weeks and months leading up to this event, you saw that Shawn was taking Diesel for granted, and then eventually Diesel just had enough after he got super kicked accidentally by Shawn. They were still tag team champions at the time. I thought it was a very well done angle. I think that it made a lot of sense to turn Diesel face. Obviously, they had high hopes for him. Do you have any thoughts about turning Diesel face at this time, or are you just going to keep saying the same thing?
So, to a degree, you can kind of look at this one like you would have at the end of the 80s when the Mega Powers exploded. Except this is almost the roles being reversed. You had two heels and one becoming a baby versus two faces and one of them becoming heel.
That's a good point.
Now, in no way, shape, or form am I saying that Kevin Nash and Randy Savage are on the same level, because they're not even close. But in a weird way, Savage and Michaels are, and Hogan and Nash are. So they were almost doing a mirror booking of this. What was this, 5 years later? With who they were trying to have as the faces of the company going forward in those roles. That's kind of the way I look at that.
Just when I think, I'm sitting here and just getting irritated by the fact that you just keep on going on with the same answer to every single question, in a different way. And then you pull that out, and that's such. I'm super impressed by that. That's such a great analogy, such a great comparison. I love that. I think that you're absolutely on the money with that. Like comparing, especially like Sean to Savage and Hogan to Nash. Like I think it makes a lot of sense. Exactly what you just said. And I think it made. I don't know if you agree with this or not. Like in all sincerity, dropping all the dripping sarcasm about Nash aside. You must agree, I think, that it made sense for Nash to be the one to turn face first and then keep Sean as a heel. And then eventually the crowd turned Sean face just the same way that they did with The Rock a couple of years later. The only difference being that when they turned The Rock face, he went back to being a stronger heel. So I just kind of think that having Nash turn face first kind of made sense. What do you think?
Oh, I agree 100% because when the crowd made Sean a face,
It was organic.
they realized that Kevin Nash sucks. So yeah, again, this is what we're gonna do. Every now and then, I'm just gonna throw in a real enlightened comment, and then I'm gonna go back to the old time.
Yeah, no, this is nice. This is like Kevin Nash savant Tyrone over here. So okay, so we go from that breakup to, of course, your most favorite title change in the history of wrestling. At that same event, Survivor Series 1994, we have Bret Hart losing the WWF Championship to Bob Backlund, a submission match. For my money, a super long match. It was a very, very well done story, very well told story. I thought it was a little bit long, but of course, Helen Hart takes the towel and throws it in, much to the same extent that Arnold Skaaland threw in the towel for Bob Backlund back when the Iron Sheik won the title in 1983. So we have sort of a repeat of history here, and then not a week later at a live event in Madison Square Garden, a house show in Madison Square Garden, Diesel pins Bob Backlund in 8 seconds, hitting the jackknife powerbomb, becoming the World Wrestling Federation champion. It is important to note that Diesel, Kevin Nash, was the longest reigning champion of the 1990s. He held the title for over a year, not by much, but by over a year. And I know that you are not a fan of Diesel's title run. And to be honest, I'm not necessarily either. But I think you do have to give some credit to the fact that it was at least trying something new with the Federation at the time. And maybe a little funny thing just popped in my head. I'm going to kind of catch you into a trap here because you're going to tell me that Diesel was the shittiest champion of all time, and that's fine. But at the same time, should Bret have kept on being the champion then? Because you hate Bret too. So tell me, what do you think?
So ushering this in was pretty much the beginning of the new generation. That's when they started referring to it. This is when you were at your height fandom. This is your era. I get it.
I wasn't watching.
No, but new generation was where you started. So that's the point I'm trying to make. This is your era. Anything I say, for the most part, you're probably going to disagree with me here. But I'm going to take you back to what you just said about my favorite championship reign ever, Bob Backlund beating Bret Hart. My favorite reign? No, not at all. Love the match. It was long, but I thought it told a great story. And yeah, he only held it for a couple of days because you need that transitional champion to get it on the next guy. You want to save your Bret Hart. You want to keep him strong so that when him and Nash fight down the line, people believe it. Well,
Sorry, I'm just going to
Backlund,
stop you. I'm going to stop you for 1 second. What I was saying was, maybe I
I'm getting to
phrased
it.
it the wrong way. I meant to say that Diesel's title run was your favorite of all time.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Anyway, going to Backlund beating Hart made sense. Then you go to Nash beating Backlund. Makes all the sense in the world because Kevin Nash is ushering in the new generation and Bob Backlund represents everything of the old generation.
Mm-hmm.
So you have him squash him in under 10 seconds. It proves that they're out with the old and in with the new. And keeping it on Backlund and not Bret made sense because then when you build to the Bret and Diesel match, it's going to mean that much more.
No, I agree 110%. I just think that everything you just said makes entire sense. I've from the beginning of us talking about this time frame, if you look at Brett dropping the title to Backlund and then Backlund dropping the title to Diesel, exactly to your point, it's protecting Brett and it saves that match, the Brett Diesel match for, however long you want to do it, long in the future you want to do it. I think it makes a ton of sense to do it that way. Transitional champions sometimes can be a matter of a couple of days or a couple of months. I mean, in a sense, we just talked about this a few minutes ago. In a sense, if you look at Hogan winning the title at WrestleMania 9, he was a transitional champion. I know it's weird to say that, but he was. I mean, you protected Brett by having Yoko win the title from him, and then you have Hogan win the title from Yoko, and then Hogan wins the title from Yoko again. You're protecting Brett in a sense. I always thought that you should have just done the Hogan Brett match, but we agreed to disagree. But my point is this: is that when you have these transitional champions, it protects certain competitors. Like, anybody listening to this podcast understands this. So I think that it's pretty fair to say that having Diesel go over on Backlund made a ton of sense at the time.
All right. Well, we just agreed on another thing on the Kevin Nash podcast, which I never thought would happen.
So then from there, we go on to the Royal Rumble 1995, and we once again have Bret Hart versus Diesel. Now, this match was dramatically different than the King of the Ring 1994 match, which we had seen, I guess it would have been 7 months previous. Kevin Nash, in my estimation, had become a phenomenally more intricate worker. I'm not saying he's a great catch can worker. He certainly wasn't the greatest worker of all time. We can both agree on that. I'm never going to dismiss that. But what I will say is that I think that his ability in the ring was much more finessed than it was in June of 1994 for that first championship match. Also, you have to look at the psychology of the match. It's quite different. You have Brett being the challenger as opposed to the champion. The psychology, they always allude to that in commentary, especially back in these years, like the mid 90s. They'd always talk about the championship advantage. The challenger has to beat the champion. The champion doesn't have to beat the challenger. They would always drive that home in the commentary. So I think that looking at this particular match, it was a much better effort from Diesel than it had been, say, 7 months previous.
I mean, you can only get better at this point. You can't get worse.
Well, you could get worse. There's examples of that.
Yeah, but no, at this point you couldn't. So to me, your point is mute, and on to the next.
No, my point's not moot, because if you're going to put the championship on a guy, you have to have a certain degree of confidence that he can carry the title. They're not going to put a championship on a guy for a year and not think that he has the ability to carry that title in some degree of stature. You're not going to just throw a champ. You're not going to grab. I know exactly what you're going to say when I say this. You're going to say, "Oh, Tom Brady would have been a better champion," but you can't take Salvatore Sincere and put the championship on Salvatore Sincere and believe that he's going to carry the title for a year. It's just not going to work that way. It's not a simple 1-2. You have the work rate plus the charisma plus the presence. You have all these elements and these intangibles that make the champion the champion. It's not simply about work rate.
Jay, we had that happen, 2 years ago? 3 years ago? Did anybody see Jinder Mahal winning the title and having the lengthy run he did?
How long was the title?
It was probably like a 3 or 4 month run, maybe 5 months.
That's not. Is that not transitional to you though?
No, not after he had multiple pay-per-view defenses and he held on to it. If he lost it right away, then sure, but he didn't.
Okay. Well, I agree to that point to a certain extent, but I also think that there were mitigating circumstances for him winning the title, namely them trying to get their presence more prominent in India and in Indian television rights. I think that has a lot more to do with it than him being the right guy for the championship. Diesel wasn't given the championship. Diesel wasn't given the championship because they were trying to get TV rights in Saginaw, Michigan.
They might have been. You never know.
They had just done pay-per-view in Saginaw, Michigan at In Your House in September 95. So
I've never even heard of that city, let alone know that they had a pay-per-view there. Your knowledge sometimes scares me.
yeah, that was the Two Dudes with Attitudes pay-per-view. Anyways, so we have going on from there. We have we're going to fast forward a bit to WrestleMania 11. I think a lot of people believe that the Shawn Michaels Diesel match probably should have been the main event just based on the work rate of the match. I disagree. I think that the Bam Bam Bigelow LT match should have closed the show. I think it made a lot of sense having, that kind of high profile person being on the show. Wouldn't have made sense to have them as a semi-main event. But that notwithstanding, you had Shawn Michaels, challenging for the WWF Championship versus Diesel with Pamela Anderson in her corner and Sid in Shawn's corner. So I would think you'd have to agree that Diesel, at least from a corner person perspective, won out that night.
Okay, I can't argue that. You
Also Jennifer McCarthy was in Diesel's corner too. So
Jennifer McCarthy.
Jenny McCarthy, sorry.
Okay. Yes, Jay, you get all the bonus points for this one. Yeah, I actually agree with you too. I think that the right match main evented the show.
And that Shawn Michaels Diesel match was a pretty solid effort, I thought. I do know that for a shoot, there was some difficulty in the match with Shawn, especially performing his high-flying maneuvers because of the amount of press around the ring. A lot of that press was shoot press that was actually allowed to be ringside, so it hampered some of Shawn's ability to do some of his aerial maneuvers. I thought the match was pretty good. I think that the power bomb that Shawn took at the end of the match was probably the worst power bomb in the history of the business. But other than that, I thought the match was pretty solid.
Yeah, I guess I got to agree with you on this one. It wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
It was fine. I will say that. It was fine.
Well, listen, we've been at this for a good close to 45 minutes. I think that we originally thought that this wasn't going to be a retrospective, but I think that this is the most logical way to go. Us doing a little retrospective about Nash's career, me discussing key moments, and you and I having discussions about the moments. I think it makes more sense than you and I just yelling at each other about I like Nash, I don't like Nash, kind of thing. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to put a pin in this. We're going to leave it at WrestleMania 11. And then from there, we're gonna go forward in another bonus episode coming up later on. We're gonna revisit this with going forth from WrestleMania 11 all the way through to the rest of 1995, which is going to be very, very riveting conversation. Like, we haven't scratched the surface about how much we are going to disagree with certain key elements coming up. And then, of course, we're going to get into Nash's departure with Scott Hall going to WCW. And I think we'll probably button this with the NWO return in 2002. Maybe touch on some of the later stuff as well. But I think for now, we're going to give the audience a break, let them digest what we've talked about thus far, and we'll revisit this in a later date. What do you think, Tyrone?
I think that sounds great. I think I've had enough Kevin Nash for a night, and I'm developing a migraine thanks to it. So thanks, Jay.
Yeah, my pleasure. Absolutely. I hope that you enjoy that migraine. Maybe you should get some Excedrin headache number 5. Try that out. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, this has been a bonus episode of the Good Friends, Better Enemies podcast. Tyrone, where can they find us?
On the Twitter machine at good_enemies and on the gram at good_enemies.
And for Tyrone and myself, just want to say thank you very much for having a listen. And I just also want to remind you that we will revisit this topic soon. And for myself, especially, Big Daddy Cool has just taken Cool of You.
No. Bye.